Shalom, everyone. Good morning to you all. I'm praying that you're with me today, and it's so good to have the privilege of breaking this bread, of Torah together with you, wherever you may be. If you are listening in right now, or later on down the road through the marvel of technology, I ask that you just leave your name and the place where you're listening from, and any comments requests, discussion issues you'd like to talk about with us, and we'll try to get back with you as soon as we can. We do value your listening and the chance to be co-laboring with you in the ways and the works of the kingdom. Today, we have the honor, the privilege of discussing with you the fifth parsha of the annual Torah cycle. This parsha is called Chayei, and it begins with Genesis 23, verse 1. It continues for basically three chapters through 25, verse 20. So 23:1 through 25:20. If you want to grab your Torah, if you want to grab your Bibles, if you want to grab your written words, find Genesis 23:1 through 25:20, and kind of follow along with me as you can, and realize the context and the addresses on which we're finding. I have labeled this particular parsha and our discussion today the parsha of preparing the way for and passing the torch to sons and daughters. Preparing the way for and passing the torch to sons and daughters. Now, this is this is 1 month away from Hanukkah. This is the 25th of Heshvan, and so within the next same cycle, same place in the cycle, the moon will be 25 Kislev. And that, of course, if you understand the Hebrew calendar, that is the first day of Hanukkah, of the Feast of Dedication, as it's called in the book of John, as most people call it, the New Testament. In this process, and when Yeshua went up to the temple in Jerusalem for a certain day, for a certain reason, it was called the Feast of Dedication. And we will not discuss much of that right now. That will be coming, but I want you to understand the times and the seasons that we are in, and why it's so important to prepare the way for the passing of the torch to sons and daughters. Now, I want to just going to go on. One man's ceiling. A subtitle of this would be "One man's ceiling is another man's floor. One woman's ceiling is another woman's floor." The idea here is that what we're doing is trying to build upon a foundation, both in individual family life and in the Torah kingdom worldview, the great plan. The idea is that each generation has a chance to move the marker beyond the where the other the person who preceded them left them. This is our challenge. One man's ceiling is another man's floor. So building a foundation, preparing the way for the next generation, preparing the way for and initiating the brain of the sons and the daughters. I call it the transcendence imperative, the imperative to transcend, to go beyond just our personal relationship with the creator of the universe and our particular level of responsiveness or lack thereof, our particular wants, needs, and desires in our lifetime, to go beyond that, to transcend that, to overcome the flesh fixation, obsession with self and with pleasure and with avoidance of pain and with thrill and with knowledge, acquiring information and feeling superior, all about feelings in the flesh. So transcending that. And there is in Torah, in the covenant, a transcendence imperative. Covenant implies that things will last beyond our lifetimes, will last beyond our generation. Another fact that every generation will have a witness, will have His Majesty's special forces or secret service and operative in their world. For that to take place, we need to co-labor with the Holy One to prepare the way for the sons and the daughters. So the question becomes, what will we do? What can we do? What must we do for the sake of the sons and the daughters and the seed? What will we do to perpetuate the King's great end game, the cross-generational plan that is designed to spread the wisdom, the counsel, the love, the guidance, the call to return to your purpose, to your meaning, that goes to every generation, goes to every nation, goes to every tribe and tongue, goes to every seed. What will we do? What can we do? What must we do for the sake of the sons and the daughters? What must we do for the sake of the seed? Now, I want to remind you that everything in covenant is based upon seed. The covenant runs with the seed. I could go into some legal issues about covenants running with the land. When a land is under an easement or something like that, the covenant runs with the land. This is a bigger covenant than covenant running with the land. This is a covenant running with the seed. We can take us back to Genesis 1:11, which says that Elohim said, "Let the earth bring forth grass and herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." Now, understanding that the earth, the eretz, the land, the dirt is supposed to provide and yield seed and bring forth species that reproduce their seed. So it is with man. Man is drawn from the eretz. He's drawn from the earth. And we too have a responsibility to procreate, to perpetuate, and not just to procreate physically, be baby daddies and mommy daddies, baby mamas, but instead to be fathers, avot, to be mothers, the mothers, and to be patriarchs and matriarchs, and to pass on one man's ceiling, our ceiling being our sons, our daughters, our seeds, floor, where they will build upon what we've built upon. Now, lest you think this is all just something from Genesis chapter 1, I want you to take you directly into the Abrahamic narratives, to Genesis 22. I could go in other places, but I'm going to stick with Genesis 22 because it's so current. It's where we were right before this Parsha. In Genesis 22, at the Moriah experience, at the very end of it, the Holy One speaks from heaven. And Genesis 22, verses 17 and 18. And the voice of the Holy One speaks. It says, "In blessing, I will bless you," speaking to Avraham. "And in multiplying, I will multiply your seed." Here we go again with the seed concept. "In blessing, I will bless you," he says to Avraham. "And in multiplying, I will multiply your seed. And it'll be as the stars of the heavens and as the sand which is on the seashore." And goes on, "And your seed will possess the gates of their enemies." That's not happened in Abraham's life, really. This is going to take place in Yitzhak and Yaakov and Yosef and Yehuda and down the line. Our seed, the seed of Abraham, will possess the gate of their enemies. "And in your seed," he says, continues. Three things about the seed in this Genesis 22, 17 through 18 passage. First thing is that they will be blessed and multiplied as the stars of the heavens and the sand on the seashore. And then the seed will possess the gates of their enemies. And thirdly, in your seed will all the goyim, all the ethnicities, all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have shamad my voice, he said to Avram. Now this call to prepare the way for the seed, to prepare the ground, to till the soil, to prepare the area for the seed, and to prepare the seed and the sons itself. This is the idea of transgenerational impact, which is the ultimate objective of our divine romance. It is not supposed to be just about us. It is supposed to be about our seed and the seed after us. So it is time that we consider the challenge of passing the torch on to the next generation or new generations. The idea of covenant is that it runs with the seed. Brit means that you cut, you cleave. It's from the Hebrew verb bara, which starts the Torah. Bereshit, bara, Elohim. Well, the idea of cutting, cleaving, carving out. And so the idea of a covenant is something is cut. It's cut deep into us. It says in the Brit Hadashah that the word is living and active and cuts even and divides even the soul from the spirit, the nephesh from the neshama. Well, that's what the covenant does. It makes a deep, deep cut. It runs deep in our souls and into our bodies, and it separates that which is flesh and earthly and the human intellect from that which is spirit and divine and has eternal perspective and eternal purpose and eternal impact upon the world. This is what the covenant is designed to do. So it cuts deep to every facet of who we are, and it cuts deep into the times in which we live. The covenant with us, the cutting that's done in us, should form a cut in the times that we live in the places we visit, the travel, the space that we occupy, the people that we interact with, particularly those closest to us, but also those who see us from a distance, who perceive us, who maybe even hate us or fear us, but we should have an impact upon all those folks. There's a deep cut within us that separates in us, unlike other people, separates the nephesh from the neshama, separates the soul, mind, will, and emotions from the deep eternal spirit. Well, so the way in which we impact people around us by virtue of the covenant is thought. We think differently than they do. We must continue to think kingdom thoughts, the spirit thoughts, as opposed to the flesh or the neshama or the nephesh or the pseudo intellect's ways of thinking. If we allow ourselves to engage and allow ourselves to immerse ourselves in worldly pseudo-intellectual pursuits, philosophy, sociology, psychology, if we allow ourselves to go into human religions, human-oriented or human-focused or human-centered religion, if we to ideology, to political argument, if this is what we're talking about, then we're not cutting the road, but preparing the way for the next generation. Thought is, we must learn to think the thoughts of the king, and then to have an attitude that reflects the demeanor and the heart of the king. We must learn to develop and follow his priorities, kingdom priorities, rather than earthly, fleshly, pseudo-intellectual, selfish priorities. We must present an appearance that marks the difference, that something has happened in us and is different from us and is different from the rest of the world. We must not look like everybody else. We must not speak like everybody else. Our vocabulary must be higher, elevated. Our vocabulary must be challenging in a beautiful way, in a way that inspires and encourages. We're not to be repeaters of gossip, repeaters of stories, of scandal mongering, of hate mongering, of fear mongering. We're not to be doing those things. Our mouths are dedicated. There's been a cut in our tongue, a cleft in our tongue that causes now there to be blessing spoken forth from us. This is a part of and then behavior and reaction to others' behavior. These are things that are different by virtue of the covenant. That's how we impact the world, how we impact space, how we impact the times in which we live, and how, of course, we impact the people that are around us. A covenant, a brit, is a multi-generational agreement. It has to involve seed. Left, the cutting in our spirits to take place to reveal the neshama, the God-inspired eternal part of us, then we will have a beneficial impact upon the world, and he can expand our influence in that regard because of the beneficial impact. The covenant implies both favored alliance, though, and predictable interactions. We must not act independent of him. We must walk with him. We must walk in step with him. We must try to keep ourselves before him at all times, subject to his inspection, subject to his accountability, subject to his discipline. It forms this special bond whenever we learn to trust him. This special bond is forged in blood. It is confirmed by oaths of loyalty that are recurring over the course of time. It is based upon corrective disciplines being received, accepted, and implemented, periodic accountability being embraced and evidenced by the covenant signs and the marks in our flesh, in our speech, in our behavior, in our presentation of our appearance, in our reactions and responses to situations. Well, since the covenant runs with the seed, we see that this is going to be critical, that we learn to think not just about ourselves and our own interest, but the interest of those who will follow and come behind us, and learn pathways and protocols of covenant succession. Pathways and protocols of covenant succession. See, it's one thing for an individual to personally walk with the Holy One for a few weeks, months, years, even decades. It is entirely something else, another thing, to pass the values and the experiences and the ways of relating to people, places, creation, and things that one learns from walking with the Holy One on to one's children, one's sons, one's daughters, one's children's children, one's sphere of influence. We are called to Kadash, to sanctify, to bring a level of holiness, a level of kingdom presence into every place we go, to every material thing we encounter, to all the people we meet along the way. In other words, we're called to be realm travelers, beloved. We travel between realms, and we open up portals for the heavenly realm in the earthly realms, and we are. That's the Holy One had Yeshua pray and teach us to pray. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, that we should become portals and open portals wherever we go, where the kingdom of heaven comes to earth. His rule, his reign, his ways come wherever we go. As much as Abraham dug wells in the desert, in the wilderness, we'll learn about that in subsequent days. As Abraham dug wells in the desert, we are to introduce all those who Shema to the portals and the protocols. The portals of the Spirit are like the wells of Abraham in the desert. We are to provide life-giving, living water, portals of living water, springs and wells like Lahoi Roy that was opened for Hagar last week in last week's discussions. Well, with that being said, let us begin with our call to worship. I invite you to join me wherever you are in singing this beautiful blessing before reading the Torah, the Baruch Hu. And if you don't know it, you can just listen to Hebrew words. Will hopefully waft into your spirit and awaken your neshama. Separate your nefesh from your neshama. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vayed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amin V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. And now with our call to worship being spoken, our neshama being awakened to arise and soar into the heavenlies, open our eyes, O Holy One, that we may see wondrous things in your Torah. For we are but strangers in the earth, so do not hide your commandments from us. Last week, at the end of Parsha Vayera, we left off with a latter days affirmation of Avram. I've sort of mentioned it already. 22:17 through 18, the Holy One spoke and he said, Ki barech, when I bless, averech, I will bless you. And when I multiply, or when I cause to expand, I will multiply, cause to expand your seed. And it will be as the stars of the heavens and as the sands of the seashores. And your seed, your zera, will possess the gates of their enemies, and in your seed all the goyim, the peoples, the ethnicities of the earth will find their blessing because you have shemad my voice. Well, that was the beautiful declaration of purpose, the upgrade of Abraham's mission beyond himself to his seed. And Abraham has now passed the great test of Moriah as we begin our Parsha Chayei Sarah. Abraham passed the great test of Moriah. Yitzhak also has passed the test of Moriah. He now has a testimony that will shock the world. The testimony of Yitzhak is a story that Abraham's testimony is the ceiling. Is the floor, rather. Yitzhak is the ceiling. Yitzhak has a story of awe and wonder and grace and deliverance to tell the world. He was, as it were, dead. He had no hope. He had surrendered all, and then he received his life back from him and the blessing of the Holy One. This story is one that only Rabbi Yeshua, our great Torah teacher, Rabbi Yeshua, will ever surpass in quality, the quality of the resurrection, the quality of coming, the death yielding greater life. Seed coming to the earth, falling to the earth, and dying, and bringing forth a new harvest. But after the Moriah experience, after this great elevation of Abraham and this great blessing that provided the testimony to end all testimonies until Yeshua for Yitzhak, then Abraham gets two messages. The first message, which we found in last week's Parsha, chapter 22, verses 20 through 24, was very good news, it seemed. Very good news. It came from the house of his brother Nahor, way back in Haran, in Mesopotamia, in Padan Aram. And what he found out, what this messenger brought, was news that since Avram and Sarah had left Haran, years ago, decades ago, Avram has become an uncle to 8 boys. 8 new young men are running around. And then they're not young anymore. Now they've grown and they have children. And one of them has had a girl, the first girl that we see mentioned in that family. And her name is Rivka, or often in English she is renamed Rebecca. Rivka is born to Betuel, who was born to Nahor, who was Avram's brother. So we have this seemingly good news. We have this wonderful female child born into this, and I'm sure there were others, but that's the one. And he gets the word that there's a young lady named Rivka that lives in Padan Haran, that is in his family. But the second message, that was the first message. The second message will not be so good news. While Avram and Yitzhak are away having the adventure of their lives at Mount Moriah, as we've talked about, the blessing, the upgraded calling to seed after seed, generation after generation, the great testimony that Yitzhak got. Well, while they were away doing all these wonderful things, something happened to Sarah. So come now, beloved, let us go up to the ancestral camp at Hebron and let us pay our respects to the greatest matriarch of them all. And let us both ponder the meaning of and consider the protocols of the Hebrew phrase, Lador Vidor, from generation to generation. Lador Vidor, may the kingdom of heaven advance. Lador Vidor, from generation to generation, may his ways be reflected through the covenant and the people of the covenant. Our first reading, if you would join with me, I'm going to read this. I will read it first with the Hebrew, and I understand you may or may not understand the Hebrew words in your natural understanding, but your spirit knows it very well. And so I'm trying to call forth and awaken your neshama, your spirit, the God-breathed spirit that lays within you, resides within you from the time of Adam and his Genesis 2:7 experience. So awaken that spirit. I'll read you the Hebrew, and then I'll read you the English translation as best I can form it. Vayihi Chayei Sarah, and Sarah's life was Me'ah Shana ve'ezrim Shana ve'sheva Shanim, 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. Shnei Chayei Sarah, years of the life force of Sarah. Vetamot Sarah, and Sarah died. B'kiryat Arba Hebron, and Sarah died, gave way to mortality, maybe, or reached her vanishing point, as I like to call it, at the city of 4, Kiryat Arba, the city of 4, which is Hebron. Hebron in Hebrew. Now that's the first message. As I said, this is the message that was not good news. This is a shock. While Avram and Yitzhak were away, having the experience of 1,000 covenantal lifetimes, the prototypical surrender, their beloved matriarch, their Avram's wife, Yitzhak's mother, has crossed the threshold into the other realm. So what we'll have is we're going to have the story, a very short story of the death of Sarah Amanu, our matriarch, and we followed by Abraham's season of mourning, and we will learn how a patriarch, how a covenant partner of the creator of the universe mourns, how we don't mourn as others do, as other peoples of other nations, and yet we share the loss, the grief, but we don't share the behaviors that they engage in. Abraham's season of mourning is the second subject we'll talk about. The third thing is the purchase of Machpelah. As you've noticed, if you looked at the title of this particular discussion online through Facebook or through YouTube, you'll see that I referenced the purchase of a field in which is found a treasure, referencing a parable told by Yeshua. And then also the next parable, in the next verse of that gospel message, the purchase of the pearl of great price. And this is all about the purchase of the cave of Machpelah, the field and the cave and the orchard and the trees and the cave around Machpelah, the treasure found in the field. And then we'll learn about something else after the burial of Sarah. And the final saying goodbye to her, Avram will give instructions to find Yitzhak a bride. This is the pearl of great price. Rivka will become the pearl of great price for us, and their money is no object in this process. We are finding the pearl of great price, and he is redeeming his bloodline, if you can go with it. He's becoming the kinsman redeemer, and basically his last primary act as covenant partner is to redeem Rivka from the horrors of the house he came out of, and to establish her basically with Yitzhak as being the new patriarch and matriarch. And then we'll see what happens with this as the quest for a woman of noble character in the midst of people who are human and are fallible, and covenant must be cut into their lives bit by bit, because there are things that do not want to be surrendered, things that are of the flesh and of the pseudo-intellect. And Rivka will demonstrate that over the course of her time, but yet she will become a matriarch rather. And then we'll see the meeting, the actual connection that's forged between Yitzhak and Rivka, and we learn about this thing between a man and a woman. The first time we've ever met it in the Torah, where Yitzhak loved Rivka. What does love mean? Well, we will not have a chance to talk about that in great detail, but meditate on this. This is part of the meditation. What is love between a man and a woman in accordance with the covenant protocols? Not the love that the world of a man or woman, spouse or lover that one has in according to the romance of the world. But what is it in the covenant to have love for a spouse, a lover, a partner in the covenant? And then finally, we will have the death and burial, the preparations for death of Avram Avinu. He will marry again. He will have 6 more sons through Keturah, his wife after Sarah's death. They took after Sarah's death. He will then give gifts to all his children, but he will give all of everything substantive that he possesses, including the spiritual things of who he is. He will pass that on to Yitzhak. And then we will see that there is a final kind of goodbye for now to Yishmael. Toledot, the generations of Yishmael are the way this concludes. So we have a lot to talk about, and not much time to talk, basically speaking. So if we kind of look at our time, I see I've got just a few more minutes that I can talk to you here. But I want to discuss with you a matriarch. What is a matriarch? What is a mother? What are the functions in a covenant, particularly? How does a mother function? What is supposed to be a mother look like? Not just a baby mama. I'm talking about a mother and a matriarch. Sarah is not just referred to as Abraham's friend or lover. He's referred to her as his Isha, his wife, and she becomes the model for all of our covenant marriages. That she, though she's not perfect, and though we see her have make mistakes, this is not a requirement. Perfection is not required for the covenant. Growth and maturity and overcoming is required for the covenant. That is part of the sign that we are not like the rest of the world who gets caught up and stuck in ruts and wallows in its mistakes and in its griefs. We are going to see that the idea of being a matriarch, Imanu, our mother, a mother of many peoples in this process, will be developed in Sarah's life. She who remained stunningly beautiful physically through at least her 90s and turned the heads of kings as well as, of course, Avram all of her life, is going to reach her vanishing point, a point of surrendering to mortality. It doesn't mean she's not existing anymore. It means that in the physical form that we knew her, the shell which housed her neshama is no longer going to function, and that's what happens at the beginning of our story. And it means to us who live here on this earth in the natural and the mortal, it seems she's dead, but that's only because we don't understand what's beyond the veil. She is still alive. She's just not inhabiting that frame anymore. Well, the blessing of Sarah. Sarah carries something from the Holy One, and this is the idea of a matriarch. A matriarch in the covenant realm must carry a blessing. So what is your blessing if you're a female, if you're a woman out there? Whether you're a child or whether you're a young wife or whether you're looking to become a wife or whoever you may be in whatever age and level of relationship you are. But what is the blessing the Holy One has given to you? The Holy One said this in Genesis 17. He talked to Avram about Sarah and said, I will bless her. I will lift her up. I will release her from restrictions and limitations. I will place her in a special realm. I will bless her and give you a son from her. The first step is just the idea of being fertile and overcoming her own infertility and her barrenness, as we've known. I will make her fruitful for you, and bring forth fruit from you. And then it goes forward, I will bless her again, so that she may become nations, so that she may become ethnicities, crossing ethnicities, that she may become a mother of many, many, many nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. So this is what he's promised. The Holy One, upon a matriarch, promises the special, not just momentary, a child or two, but that generations will follow. Generations across ethnicities, across lines, across borders will come to know her, to understand her, and to call her Sarah, Imanu. We'll call her our matriarch. We'll identify with her. We'll draw strength from her. We'll return to the rock from which they are hewn, being her. Kings will come from her. This is our royal line. There is a potential for royalty in every woman, and when the Holy One speaks and you receive the blessing, and other people begin to speak into that and receive that blessing and nurture that blessing, then you see that the potential for royalty and for cross-generational impact is in every woman, including you. Now, Sarah's death, as Avram was 137 years old, Ishmael was around 51, I think. Yitzhak was around 37. These are the times, and this is real. This is a real human being that their physical body departed, and this is a shock. It comes as a shock. It causes a shock because from the idea of marriage, from Avram's standpoint, marriage in the covenant is designed to be the couple. It becomes bachar echad, one flesh. This joinder happens, and then suddenly there's a pulling apart, a tearing apart of that, and it has a great impact emotionally. And yet the idea is to hold fast to the covenant and not to ignore it. It's real, but to do it in a way that honors the Holy One and honors the cross-generational calling of life upon us to deal with the fact that we have been torn apart from our lover. Now, same thing with regard to the son. The mother, what is a mother to you? First, I won't even go into the details of what, but you know what a mother means to you. And if she didn't, you knew why she didn't. You knew what happened, and you felt a loss that you were deprived of that. The mother is so critical. The mothers are more sometimes important than the fathers, it seems, because they have more day by day impact and the value, at least to a son. The joy of the mother and the nurturing of the mother means as much, if not more, than the nurturing and the joy of the father in you. So we have this major shift take place. This is a crisis mode. In the context of covenantal counterculture and the grand plan of the Holy One, do you even understand what it means to be a husband or what it means to be a wife? Do you understand it means more than just a romance like the world sees things, and a sense that you're a couple, you're a partnership in a business enterprise, or you're some sort of emotional basket that you try to put all your eggs into? This is something more. This is about becoming fully who you really are. And the one thing about the covenantal husbands and wives, the marriage idea of the covenant, is not that you're going to get fulfilled in the sense that people think, I'll get someone to pay my bills, or I'll get someone to cook my meals, or whichever it is you may be looking at it, or I'll get someone to love me and appreciate me and make me laugh and whatever, make me feel good about life. And that's what most people in the natural world outside of covenant think a marriage is supposed to be. But instead, in the kingdom, in the covenant, where the soul is divided and separated from the neshama says, no, I am to call this person is to be my ezer chanegdo, that which stands opposite me and brings out the best in me, by sometimes bringing out the worst in me. I can never transcend things that I don't even know are in me, but the spouse, the husband or the wife, is going to bring out in me the things that I didn't want to think were there. I didn't know were there. The jealousies, the pettiness, the selfishness, the manipulation, the control, the sense of superiority and pride and arrogance. These things will be brought out by a spouse, not necessarily by a lover, but by a spouse who you walk with day by day in the covenant. And the idea is that the Holy One knows we need husbands and wives, though we may not like it at all times, because those husbands and those wives are designed to be sand and sandpaper against us sometimes, as much as their comfort. And therefore they bring out our worst, and by doing so and by working through this and not leaving, bucking and running and screaming divorce and I don't love you anymore and you don't love me anymore. That's not covenant. Covenant says, no, this is what we have, and this is here for a purpose, and the Holy One has given us each other to grow through, to work through these things and stay in the relationship, stay in the situation. Now, obviously, there are certain things that must cause a separation. I'm not going to get into those, but you can imagine if there's physical violence, if there's emotional trauma like adultery, those things must be dealt with. They cannot be ignored and just presumed it's okay. But in every other scenario, we're dealing with situations where now the husband, if we make the commitment to husbandry or wifing, if we make something to be an ish or an isha in the covenant, to show the world what covenant means and to learn ourselves what covenant means, we must work through these things with the person, realizing the exceptions are violence, physical violence, and emotional trauma such as through adultery. Now, that being the case, what is a husband and a wife? Oh, it's very important in the covenant. It's different than in the rest of the world. Don't judge, don't gauge where you are as a husband and wife in the covenant versus what the world does. Don't look at what happens on the television or in the news or what other people do. That is not your standard. We're not judging. We're called to a higher level of interaction, one that honors and glorifies the creator of the universe. Now, same thing happens with regard to what is a father or a mother. We have certain higher obligations than the world does to our children, to our sons and our daughters and our seed. These are represented. One man's ceiling is another man's floor. We're not to be all about ourselves. We are about our children and our children's children. and those who may not even be physically related to us, but who have latched themselves on or who are learning from us, the disciple sons and daughters. All right, so I have those things mentioned. The idea of Sarah's passing, of her reaching of her vanishing point, and what happened to Avram. Avram, there's two things that Avram did. His season of mourning. It says in the Hebrew, "Vayavo Avram lisfad l'kazara," and Abraham came to mourn in English. Safad, Hebrew verb. Lisafud. And Avram came to mourn for Sarah. We're going to talk about Safad as the first element of mourning. And the second thing, Liv Kota. The Liv Kota. And he came, first of all, to mourn for her, Safad, the verb, and then he came at the same time, in the same sequence, to Chota, to weep, to cry, Baka, to baka, to cry, to weep, to have tears. We'll talk about what those words mean, but there's two phases in the Hebrew. And I know that the psychologists and the grief counselors and all that stuff have 5 phases of grief and all that sort of thing. And I don't discount all that, but I want you to know that biblically, from a covenant standpoint, there are really just 2 stages of mourning, 2 stages of transcendence, of passing on from whenever a loved one like this, a spouse or a child dies, or a parent dies. Vayavo Avram lishfod lesara, and Avram came to Safad for Sarah. We'll talk about what that means. V'livkota, and he came to Baka for her. Those 2 things we'll talk about. So first, lishfod, Safad. It literally means striking or beating the chest. If you go to the Brit Hadashah, or the Apostolic Scriptures, the Gospels as they're called sometimes, there are a couple of references in the Gospel of Luke. Luke, the physician, tells us the story. And first of all, in a parable that Yeshua told, he talks about this tax collector who was sorry for what he had done and for who he was. And he went to the temple to pray, and he was there, and he was crying, weeping, and he was beating his chest. Okay, this is Safad. He was doing a very traditional, very emotional. It's beating the chest, and then we have the idea of the al-chet protocol. If you're familiar with the liturgy on Yom Kippur in the synagogue, there is a certain liturgical prayer that's prayed called the al-chet, all sin, and it lists all the sin we have committed. And every time you say we have committed, we are guilty. We are, and as a covenant nation, we take that and we express our sorrow by beating or striking the chest. Now, there's another tradition that develops by virtue of then once you struck your chest to rip the garment, to rend the garment. Rend your garments is one of the ways of expressing this, and it's now often done more with words. And they've actually developed the idea of eulogy come out of this. It's like a verbal beating of the chest to speak of those one we have lost and to eulogize. Now, to think about the Safad level of this, the phase of grief that is called Safading, or to Safad. It is the exercise, the screaming out for some level of able to control ourselves or this thing. It is a physical thing. It is something that we do that just cries out, we're not ready to turn loose yet. It tells you a hint of what the next phase is going to be, the second phase. But the first phase is holding on to, and so the practice of striking one's breast is a profoundly human behavior. It is a exercise of humility. It is communication beyond words, actions, the touching of the breast, the beating against the chest, the tearing of the garment, the expression, the cry of the eulogy. These are the things that are the first phase of grief. It conveys great emotions, and the great emotions can range, but they're mostly what we would think of as painful or negative emotions. There's sorrow, there's sadness, there's anger, there's blame, sometimes self-blame. There's survivor guilt. Why did them, not me? Why I should be the one. Survivor envy. Other people didn't die. They had the same situation my loved one had, didn't die. How come they get to live and mine didn't? How come their husband or wife didn't lose, or their father and their son, their daughter didn't lose their loved one, and I did? Survivor envy. Then there's regret. Because my fault. I could have done something different. If only I had. If only that. Then there's just the plain shock. There's these expressions of the Safad phase, the phase of beating the chest, of trying to exercise some level of control, even in thought or in words or in action, some way to show that you're still in control. This is the Safad aspect. And everybody who deals with death, who loses a loved one, as we say, misplaces for the time being a loved one, as it might be thought, it goes through this issue of how do you not try to control it in some way. The second time in Luke was after the death of Yeshua, and the veil was torn. You remember the veil in the temple was torn, and I won't get into details about that. But that's an expression of the Kiryat. But more than that, whenever the people went away after seeing the earthquake and the centurions say, "Surely this was the Son of the Holy One," the changes in the atmosphere and the light and the darkness of the earth, they went away and they beat their chest, realizing all these negative emotions: sorrow, sadness, anger, blame, survivor guilt, survivor envy, regret, shock. This is the Safad phase of trying to deal with the situation that our human being life can't do. And then there's the second part, the second phase of the grief. Vilikotah in Hebrew, it says, and he came to weep for her. Avram came to weep. Word weep, baka. It literally means to distill water. There's water, but it hasn't come out yet. It's still hanging. It's still lingering, and something causes the water to come out. It's like tears, flows out and to make drops. And there's two levels of baka. We know that by experience, one is bitter tears, when it's just a sobbing, a wailing, a sense of emotional release, and that's the key factor here in release. But then there's, over a period of time, the idea is that those bitter tears turn into sweet tears. Tears of sweet remembrance, of thanksgiving, that we had the privilege, the opportunity, for as long as we did, to know this person, to live life with this person, to go through experiences, to have wonderful memories. But it takes a while for bitter tears to go into sweet tears. But the commonality of both of things, in both situations, from Safad to Baka, particularly the Baka is a surrender. The Safad was more of trying to take the last vestige of control. And then Baka is to surrender, to give up. Evidence of acceptance at some level of what has happened. May not be gladness, but acceptance of what has happened. An abandonment of self-will, of the ability to control. This is where the serenity prayer can come in. God, grant me this serenity to accept the things to change the things I can, to accept the things I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. There's a certain level of serenity that comes with tears. And initially there's a passion and a fire and a shaking, and then eventually the tears become sweet and soft and surrender. Well, also with the abandonment of self-will and the power to change or control what's happened, what comes next in a covenant person is a commitment to move on, to get up and move on, to get up, to get back up and move on, honoring the memory of the one that we have left behind, honoring the covenant into which we're called, leaving a floor, leaving a ceiling for the next person's floor. So there we have the grief. So I want to kind of tell you that the next thing is going to happen is going to be the purchase of Machpelah, the purchase of the tomb, the treasure hidden in a field. I implore you to go and understand that there is something about having a place of remembrance, a sanctified place, set apart for a family, for a bloodline. Now, Avram is going to be buried in the same cave later. So will Yitzhak. and so will so will Yaakov. And this is very important to us to understand. So will Sarah. Sarah will be. So will Rivka. And so will Leah. And so this is going to be a family plot that has meaning. And it is not to be worshipped or some place of where it, but it has a holiness to it, because what we do is we bring Kedusha, energy, the holiness of heaven, into that realm. The pearl of great price will be the bride for Yitzhak, and we'll see how Rivka, and later in this parsha, we won't have time to talk about it in this session, but Rivka will be brought in. She'll be redeemed from the household of bondage of Laban and Bethuel, and brought and caused to become and develop into a matriarch over the course of time. Now, I want to just conclude our discussion this morning. I've hoped I've touched some level, the Holy One rather, has touched some level of your spirit and is awakening you. And I want to just read this. This is the last phrase of the Kaddish prayer. The prayer that, knowing that Sarah Imanu has passed, that we'll also in this week, in this Torah portion, say goodbye to Avram. The ceiling has been laid, the floor will be the next man's way. These are the words that conclude the Kaddish, and I pray them over you. Yehi shlama rava min shemaya. May there be abundant shalom from heaven. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, and life for us and for all Israel. And may you say, Amen. V'imru, Amen. And say, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. The Holy One, He crafts wholeness and wellness and peace from His celestial heights. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. May He craft wholeness and wellness and peace for us. Ve'al kol Yisrael, and for all Israel. Ve'imru, Amen. And may you say, Amen. Well, Shabbat Shalom, beloved. We'll see you next week. Be blessed. Have a wonderful Shabbat.